Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in our junior English class, and we are now turning to the MyPerspectives junior volume. We are on page 2 and following. We are introducing you to unit number 1, Writing Freedom, Words That Shaped a Nation. I want you to notice and to mark in your MyPerspectives volume on page 3 that we have two questions that are fascinating here. The first is the essential question: what is the meaning of freedom? And then at the very bottom of the page, notice that your argument essay prompt will be, what are the most effective tools for establishing and preserving freedom? You'll see there on page 3 a list of the readings that we will be doing. On page 4, I want you to go through these unit goals, and on page 5, I want you to work with this academic vocabulary and argument work. And now we are turning to our launch text. Every one of our units in MyPerspectives will have one of these launch texts, and it will always give you a model of the type of writing that we'll be doing at the end of the unit. In this case, the argument model. Read with me on page 6. This selection is an example of an argument, a type of writing in which the author presents a claim and organizes evidence and reasons to support that claim. This is the type of writing you'll develop in the performance-based assessment at the end of the unit, as we said. Now notice, as you read, look closely at the writer's argument, including the consideration of various viewpoints. Mark facts and examples that provide strong evidence to support the main claim. Now, the title of this reading is Totally Free. And as we read, notice you have 7 paragraphs here. Do you see those numbered off to the left? As we read now, I want you to annotate, that is to say, to take notes while we are reading. Notice you'll have some area there in the MyPerspectives volume for you to write. We want you to write in the book. Obviously, we want you to try to understand better what it is you're reading. We'll begin. If you ask a dozen high school students to define freedom, odds are that 10 of them will answer, quote, freedom means that I can do anything I want, end quote. For many people, freedom is an absolute. It implies the right to think, speak, or act however one wishes. Because we live in a civil society, I, by the way, would already have circled the word freedom in the first line. I would have underlined the quote that was provided there. And now for sure, I'm going to circle the word civil as in civil society. Because we live in a civil society, however, we need to consider other people's rights as we exercise our own freedoms. That is to say, now notice, we're going to be introduced to the tension of this little brief argumentative piece, and it's one of the fundamental questions of our studies in junior English, namely, how do you balance the goal of the individual, and the desires and the wants of the individual, versus the goal and the desires of the group? Notice this tension. A better world, notice the argument now, would combine essential human freedoms with the understandings that my freedoms should not conflict with your right to lead a safe and happy life. Paragraph 2. Suppose that those 10 high school students had the total freedom they describe. They might drive a car without a license because they were free to do so. They might even drive your car, because total freedom means that they can have anything they want and do anything they like. Notice, circle the word total here, right? They would be free to attend school or not, to run screaming down the hallways if they choose, or even to treat other people cruelly without fear of reprisal. Total freedom could result in lawless mayhem. Now, of course, mayhem, chaos, right? Lawless, the opposite of law. Paragraph 3. Despite their desperate desire to be free from England's rule, now here we go. We're beginning with our introductory set of comments for our study of junior English, and we're beginning chronologically, so we're going back to the very early roots of American thought. Despite their desperate desire to be free from England's rule, our nation's early leaders carefully defined freedoms in the Bill of Rights. Obviously, you're going to circle that phrase. That's going to be an important one. Obviously, it's capitalized, which tells you something important. They did not say, quote, everyone is free to do as he or she chooses, end quote. They said, quote, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances, end quote. They established a delicate line. I would circle the word delicate because I think it's an important one, right? That is to say, it's precious. A delicate line between the rights of individuals and the power of the government. Paragraph 4. In his 1941 State of the Union address, President Franklin Roosevelt identified 4 key freedoms as being basic human rights. Now, obviously, because we're looking at 4, you're going to number them. I would write them off to the sides as well here to make sure. Notice the first one, freedom of speech and expression. The second one, freedom of worship. The third one, freedom from want. And the fourth one, freedom from fear. Those are not freedoms that one finds in a dictatorship, nor are they freedoms that we grant to each other without the oversight and protection of government institutions. I would circle oversight and protection. With the government's help and the writing of laws, my freedom from want does not allow me to steal your food, and your freedom of speech does not let you publish lies about me. We are free, but only up to the point at which our freedoms clash. Another way to say this is we're free as we allow ourselves to be, right? And obviously we have to live within community. Paragraph 5. Is it even possible to be totally free? Well, there's an interesting question, right? Which will begin to take a certain opposite view in the counter-argument here. Is it even possible to be totally free? A person living, quote, off the grid, end quote, far away from civilization, might achieve that kind of liberation. Such a person could live as he or she pleased without ever imposing on the freedoms of others. Most of us, however, notice the use of however, right? So anytime that you present the counterfactual or the counter-argument, we'll come back with the word however. Most of us, however, live in a community. We are bound by laws, bound here meaning brought together, bound by laws, and that both restrict and protect us. If we live in a dictatorship, we may be more restricted and less protected. If we live in a democracy, we may be more protected and less restricted. Human history is a balancing act. Notice earlier, and I would draw a line from delicate line to balancing act, because they both will try to represent this idea of trying to figure out a way to do this thing, the individual versus the group. Human history is a balancing act between the desire for individual freedom and the need to protect in everyone's freedoms. I would put squares around the word desire and need in this sentence, that balancing act. Now to finish, notice freedom here italicized, to emphasize, yes? Freedom implies a lack of restraint, but we are all better off if our freedoms are preserved and protected. At the same time, as members of a society, we must be sure that our freedoms do not conflict. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are powerful goals, but we must never allow one person's liberty to impose on another's happiness. Now, I want you to jump really quickly to the activity at the bottom of page 7. I want you to do this little vocabulary activity. Then over to page 8, I want you to summarize really quickly, and I want you to look at this launch activity where you take a look at these different expectations, and just be prepared for any one of those. And then finally on page 9, again, just to begin our thinking about the writing assignment that will be coming at the end of Unit 1, what are the most effective tools for establishing and preserving freedom? I want you to write for a few lines here to try to address what you consider to be the most effective tools for establishing and preserving freedom. We'll come back to do the Unit 1 history section in a moment. Thank you.